Imagine waking up in a beautiful seaside city, the Mediterranean breeze drifting through marble corridors, the smell of fresh bread rising from the bakeries below, and the distant sound of the ocean lapping at the shore just steps from your doorstep. Now imagine that everything you know, everything you love, and every person you have ever spoken to is wiped from the face of the earth before sunrise. That is exactly what happened to the people of Herculaneum on the night of October 24, 79 AD, and the story of how it unfolded is one of the most haunting chapters in all of human history. Herculaneum was a city of around 5,000 people and a beloved summer destination for wealthy Romans. Named after the legendary hero Hercules himself, it was home to grand, opulent villas and some of the most impressive Roman baths ever constructed. This was not a struggling or forgotten outpost. It was a jewel of the ancient world, a place where the Roman elite came to exhale, to celebrate, and to feel the full pleasure of what their empire had built. The streets were paved, the homes were adorned with breathtaking frescoes, the citizens were educated, comfortable, and completely unaware of what was sleeping beneath the mountain that watched over their every waking moment. For 4 days before the eruption, the people living near Mount Vesuvius had felt small earthquakes rattling beneath their feet. But these tremors were nothing new. The inhabitants of the region had grown so accustomed to seismic activity that they barely flinched. Pliny the Younger, the only eyewitness to leave behind a surviving written account of the events, noted that such tremors were frequent in the region and were not considered especially alarming. Life continued as normal. Markets opened, children played in the courtyards, wine was poured, and evening meals were prepared, as they always were, with no reason to believe that the ordinary rhythms of the day would not carry on indefinitely. When the volcano finally announced itself just after midday, the prevailing winds chose a different direction. The massive volcanic cloud was driven southeast, pouring its ash and pumice down on Pompeii and the surrounding areas, while Herculaneum, sitting on the western flank of the mountain, was temporarily spared the worst of the initial fallout. For the citizens standing along the waterfront and looking toward the sky, the scene unfolding across the bay must have been simultaneously mesmerizing and terrifying. They could see the catastrophe happening to their neighbors. They could watch the column of fire and debris climbing toward the heavens, and they had a choice to make. Archaeological evidence suggests that most of Herculaneum's population took that choice seriously and began evacuating during the first phase of the eruption. The winds had given them a narrow window of time that the residents of Pompeii never had, and many of them used it to flee toward safety inland. Families grabbed what they could carry. Mothers clutched children to their chests. The wealthy attempted to load valuables onto carts and mules. The roads out of the city filled with people moving quickly, looking over their shoulders at the towering column of fire that was growing larger by the hour. For those who fled early enough, survival was possible. For those who hesitated, the window was closing fast. Approximately 300 people chose not to flee and instead sought shelter in stone boathouses along the ancient beach, hoping to escape by sea when the moment was right. They pressed together in arched chambers near the waterfront, waiting for boats, watching the horizon, and listening to the mountain rumble in the darkness above them. They were ordinary people in an extraordinary nightmare. Fishermen, servants, mothers with infants, elderly citizens who could not manage the road, and perhaps a few who simply refused to believe that what they were witnessing was as final as it looked. The boathouses were solid structures. They offered some sense of protection. But nothing built by human hands was going to stand between those people and what was coming next. Shortly after 1 in the morning on the second day, the towering volcanic column that had been holding itself up for 12 hours finally collapsed under its own weight. The collapse sent a pyroclastic surge roaring down the slopes of Vesuvius at an estimated speed of 50 miles per hour, with temperatures reaching 500 degrees Celsius. This was not ash drifting gently downward. This was a wall of superheated gas, rock, and fire moving faster than most vehicles on a modern highway, consuming everything in its path with a force that left nothing alive. The streets of Herculaneum, The beautiful villas, the marble columns, and the bakeries that had sent the smell of fresh bread into the morning air were all swallowed in seconds. Forensic analysis of the skeletal remains discovered in those boathouses revealed that the cause of death was instantaneous thermal shock. The people in those arched chambers along the waterfront died together, frozen in their last positions, preserved beneath more than 20 meters of volcanic material that would conceal them from the world for nearly 2,000 years. They did not know that their final night would one day become one of the most studied moments in all of human history. When it was over, Herculaneum lay buried under 75 feet of volcanic material. Unlike Pompeii, which was covered in dry ash and pumice, Herculaneum was engulfed in a superheated mud and rock mixture that hardened like concrete around everything it touched. This extraordinary preservation meant that wooden furniture survived. Scrolls of papyrus were carbonized but remained intact enough to be read centuries later. Food still sat on tables. Fabric maintained impressions of the bodies that had once worn it. The city did not just stop. It was sealed, like an insect trapped in amber, holding its final moment in perfect, heartbreaking detail. It was not until the mid-18th century, when scholars began making the journey to the Bay of Naples and reporting on what excavators had found, that the wider world began to grasp what had been sleeping beneath the earth. The discoveries ignited the imagination of an entire continent, inspiring the neoclassical movement in art, architecture, literature, and philosophy. What began as rubble and rock slowly revealed itself to be something far more profound. Herculaneum was not just an archaeological site, it was a portrait of human life, painted by catastrophe and preserved by time, waiting quietly beneath the Italian soil for the world to finally come and listen to what it had to say. Today, the Herculaneum Conservation Project, a collaboration between Italian authorities and the Packard Humanities Institute, led by Professor Andrew Wallace Hadrill of Cambridge University. In June 2024, the ancient beach of Herculaneum was reopened to the public for the first time in centuries, following 3 years of intensive restoration work. Visitors are now given free access to the entire beachfront area, where they can stand on the very ground where more than 300 people spent their final hours waiting for rescue that never came. To stand there is to understand, in the most immediate and human way possible, that this was not a story. This happened to real people in a real city on an ordinary evening that turned into the last night they ever knew.